Good evening. Sara Flounders from International Action Center. And tonight is a discussion that is a continuation of a panel that was held at the Left Forum. And we wanted to really have more of a chance for people to comment, ask questions, discussion. And also there were a number of people who missed that forum and wanted an opportunity for something to be held here while Irina Koval is still with us. So the title is Resistance to Fascism and U.S. NATO Expansion. And really today we see a crisis in the Ukraine where there is liberated areas where Greg Butterfield has just returned in Lugansk and Donetsk, really foursquare in the first armed people's uprising against NATO expansion in East Europe. There is an area that is still resisting fascism, is forcibly and under the most difficult conditions, and that will be the basis of Greg Butterfield's report tonight. And the conference he attended, the activists he's in touch with, and developments there. Irina Koval, who will be translated by Anna Rebri, will describe the conditions in Odessa. The conditions where I think everyone here today knows of the horrendous massacre that took place at the House of Labor 2 years ago. The conditions to really to commemorate that massacre of determined mothers, survivors, who again organized this year and held under great threat a commemoration. And that was something there was a delegation that went from the United National Anti-War Coalition, had brought back a report. We were part of the national effort to gain petitions and signatures and a popular campaign so that this very courageous demonstration threatened by all really armed fascist thugs in large numbers could go ahead. So we see two different kinds of resistance going on in the Ukraine today, but both are response to an absolute crisis created by U.S. imperialism and the aggressive expansion of NATO as part of the plan to encircle Russia, expand NATO far beyond and carry out military maneuvers along with the sanctions that have come with this. I think people here know Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland's famous quote of spending $5 billion in order to bring about, to finance the social groupings that would carry out this fascist coup in the Ukraine. And it shows that the U.S. is really the force on every part responsible for what is happening in Ukraine today. But these reports will really bring this to life in a way that we often don't have an opportunity to do, and we're very glad that this forum could be here tonight. So I think we're going to open with Irina and with Anna translating. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And then we'll go to Greg talking about the conferences held in the liberated areas.
Okay. Я хотела бы начать свое выступление с того, что произошло осенью 2013 и зимой 2014 года в Киеве, в столице Украины.
I would like to start my presentation from the events that took place in the fall of 2013 in the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv.
Я понимаю, что многие из вас, скорее всего все, о том, что происходило, но мне хотелось бы рассказать о своем личном отношении и о том, что я чувствовала в этот момент.
I'm pretty sure that many of you, perhaps all of you, know what has happened there. But I would like still to give you an account from my own perspective and what I was feeling at the time.
По своей специальности я являюсь пиар-специалистом, маркетологом и организатором мероприятий.
By profession, I'm a PR specialist, marketer, and event organizer.
На Майдане было много моих друзей.
Many of my friends were at the Maidan at the time.
Они писали мне смс-ки, и они звонили, и Ира, присоединяйся, Ира, вставай. Но я никак не могла это сделать, потому что я не понимала, во имя чего конкретно нужно вставать и что конкретно нужно делать.
They texted me often and called me, telling me, Ira, come join us, Ira, stand up. But I couldn't force myself to do that because I didn't understand for what exactly I was supposed to stand up and what goals I was supposed to fight for.
Каждый из моих друзей, кто ко мне обращался, у них у всех были разные мотивы. У каждого какие-то свои цели.
Every of my friend who addressed me had her own motives and different reasons.
Как специалист по маркетингу я внимательно следила за исследованиями и изучала настроения и мотивы разных групп людей, которые стояли на Майдане.
As a specialist, I was attentively analyzing all the sociological studies that were done with the protesters at the Maidan and tried to analyze their mood and their motives for myself.
Я видела, что у каждой конкретной группы есть какие-то свои узкие мотивы. Это было и заступление в Евросоюз, это было мы против Януковича, мы против коррупции, мы за свободу Тимошенко, мы против разгона студентов, и мы просто потому, что там весело, и много другое.
I saw that every particular group of protesters had their own narrow agendas. For example, for the integration to the EU, against Yanukovych, the president at the time, against corruption, to free Timoshenko, against crackdown on students, just because it's fun, and others.
В общем, было только одно. Это было похоже на какой-то массовый психоз, в котором все участвовали.
The only thing was that it looked like people had a mass psychosis in which they were participating.
Мне как специалисту было видно, что он является результатом планомерной и аккуратной работы. Но люди, которые были вовлечены в этот процесс, они этого не понимали.
To me, as a specialist, it was obvious that this was a result of a systematic and accurate planning. However, people who were participating in it did not realize it.
Я видела, что этот психоз профессионально управляется. Люди, которые стояли на Майдане, они считали себя участниками спонтанного движения.
I saw that this mass psychosis was professionally organized and governed. However, people who were standing on the Maidan thought that they were participants of a spontaneous movement.
Но мне, как человеку, который организовал в своей жизни сотни крупных мероприятий, было видно, насколько сложно на самом деле организовать такое мероприятие.
However, to me, as someone who have organized a lot of events in my life, it was obvious how difficult it would be to organize such a large-scale action.
И насколько больших денег это стоит. Это и организация сцены, организация оборудования, это палатки, еда, это, в конце концов, организация туалетов и другие вещи.
And how much money would it cost? This involves organization of a podium, equipment, tents, food, toilets, and other things.
И самое главное в этом сложное – это управление поведением людей, чтобы они в нужное время шли в нужное место, идите сюда, не идите сюда.
But the most difficult thing would be the control of the mass of people to move them to a given spot at any given time.
Я хочу, чтобы меня извинили все, кто считает, что это может происходить спонтанно. Потому что я считаю, что заявляю с полной ответственностью, что спонтанно это происходить не может.
I apologize to all those who think that such events can happen spontaneously, but I will insist with the full responsibility for my statement that no, this event was not the case.
Все это происходило и с одобрения Соединенных Штатов, политические деятели которых были частыми гостями на Майдане.
It all was happening with the approval of the United States, whose major political figures were attending the Maidan.
Ну вот та же Виктория Нуланд, например, раздавала пирожки.
For example, Mrs. Nuland was giving out bread at the Maidan.
Результатом противостояния на Майдане стал государственный переворот и свержение существующей власти.
The Maidan protest resulted in the coup d'etat and overthrow of the government in power.
Непосредственными исполнителями этого насилия были вооруженные группировки, которые были объединены идеологией украинского радикального национализма.
The violence was carried out indirectly by armed groups who shared ideology of the Ukrainian radical nationalism.
На тот момент это была малочисленная, но хорошо обученная и организованные группировки.
At that time, it was a small but well-trained and organized coalition of groups.
Своими героями они объявили националистических деятелей времен Второй мировой войны. Бандеру, Шухевича, Коновальца и других деятелей.
As their heroes, they declared the nationalist leaders from the times of the Second World War, for example, Bandera, Shuhevich, Konovalets, among others.
Идеалом правых радикалов стали солдаты дивизии СС и Галичина и батальона Нахигаль, сформированные в годы Великой Отечественной войны из этнических украинцев и осуществлявшие под руководством немецких офицеров геноцид мирного населения Украины.
The ideal of the right
И Белоруссии, других стран.
The ideal of the right-wing radicals were soldiers of the divisions SS Galicia and SS Nachtigall that were formed during the Second World War out of the ethnic Ukrainians and who carried out under the control of German officers genocide of peaceful population of Ukraine, Poland, Belarus and other countries.
Они также взяли себе атрибутику, девизы и тактику своих предшественников.
They also adapted symbols, slogans, and tactics of their predecessors.
В тот период, как я уже говорила, это была малочисленная, но хорошо организованная группировка, которая даже на выборах не проходила и порога в 1%.
At the time, as I have already said, it was a small group that in elections did not even receive more than 1%.
И никто не мог поверить, что они могут повлиять на, стать лидерами в такой стране, как Украина.
And no one could believe that these people could become leaders of such a country as Ukraine.
И люди до последнего момента в это не верили. И еще более фантастической казалась мысль о том, что этих людей, которые не скрывали своих взглядов, признает цивилизованный Запад.
And a thought that seemed even more fantastic was that these people who did not hide their views would be recognized by the civilized West.
Но произошло то, что профашистские деятели не только пришли к власти, но и получили полную и безоговорочную поддержку руководства США и Евросоюза.
But what's happened, these pro-fascist groups and figures did not only come to power, but also received full and unconditioned support from governments of the United States and European Union.
Я хотела бы показать небольшие отрывки из фильма французского режиссера Пола Морейры, который был у нас в стране и сделал свой фильм.
I would like to show excerpts from the film documentary made by the French filmmaker Paul Moreira, who has visited our country.
You need the lights to...
Sans eux, la révolution ukrainienne n'aurait jamais triomphé. Pour les caméras du monde entier, ils étaient des héros. Et une diplomate américaine est même venue leur offrir des petits pains.
We're here from America. Would you like some bread? Please take something.
En février 2014, ces combattants de rue ont fait fuir le président. Et ils ont installé un nouveau gouvernement. Et certains d'entre eux ont pris les armes pour combattre les pro-russes à l'Est. Puis, ils sont devenus un danger, même pour le nouveau gouvernement.
А нас вони бояться найбільше. А бояться вони нас тому, що вони знають, що ми знаємо.
Leurs armées parallèles peuvent imposer leur ordre dans la rue. Sur Internet, ils diffusent leurs exploits. Et à Odessa, ils ont commis un massacre.
Они были опьяненные, вот когда зверь почувствует кровь, Для меня лично заслужили такую смерть. И мне их не жалко ни одной секунды.
Qui sont ces hommes derrière les masques? Pour qui travaillent-ils?
Проти продажної маргінальної демократії.
Quelle est leur vision politique?
Це тільки починає.
После переворота, который вы сейчас некоторые кадры видели, это привело к возникновению в Украине противостояния. То есть это движение антимайдан, протестное движение против радикальных украинских националистов.
After the overthrow that you just have seen on the video, there emerged an opposition movement in Ukraine called Anti-Maidan, which was against these radical Ukrainian nationalists.
Появились два лагеря среди населения. Это были сторонники и противники Майдана, Майдан и антимайдан.
There thus began the coexistence of two camps in the population of Ukraine, the supporters and the opponents of the Maidan and anti-Maidan respectively.
Сторонников Майдана было большинство в западных областях Украины, а сторонников антимайдана в восточных.
The majority of supporters of the Maidan were largely from the western provinces in Ukraine, and the supporters of anti-Maidan from the eastern.
Но самая сложная ситуация, с моей точки зрения, сложилась в Одессе, потому что Одесса находится относительно в центре, и сторонников, противников Майдана в ней было примерно поровну.
But the most difficult situation, in my opinion, was in Odessa, because Odessa is located in the center of the country, and that's why we had both supporters and opponents approximately equally.
Одесса – это очень мирный город, и как сторонники, так и противники Майдана их собирали многотысячные митинги и марши. Но к чести организаторов этих маршей нужно сказать, что это никогда не пересекалось, эти процессы никогда не пересекались.
Odessa is a peaceful city, and both supporters and opponents of the Maidan were carrying out big demonstrations of many thousands of people. However, we should give credit to them because these marches never crossed each other's ways.
Все это происходило до 2 мая 2014 года.
And thus, everything was happening up till May 2nd, 2014.
В тот день должен был проходить футбольный матч, и сторонники Майдана решили устроить шествие. Приехали очень большое количество футбольных фанатов, очень агрессивных, и организовали под руководством этих бандеровских начальников, они организовали агрессивное шествие в центре города.
On that day, May 2nd, there was a soccer match planned in the city, and the supporters of the Maidan came into the city as soccer fans, and they organized an aggressive demonstration under control of the Bandera supporters, the leaders of the Maidan movement in Kiev.
Они хотели разогнать мирный палаточный городок сторонников антимайдана.
They wanted to disperse the tent camp, which was set up by the supporters of the anti-Maidan on the Kulikovo field.
В результате в центре города произошли настоящие уличные бои, в которых погибло несколько человек. И потом озверевшие эти хулиганы, эти радикалы, они бросились на Куликовое поле, подожгли палаточный городок и согнали людей в здание профсоюзов большое, которое находится на площади, и подожгли его.
As a result, there were street clashes, which led to death of few people. Afterwards, the enraged hooligans went to the Kulikovo field, set on fire the tent camp, and forced the people, the supporters of anti-Maidan, into the house of trade unions, which was in the area. And then they set the building was also on fire.
Короткое видео, в котором вы увидите, что происходило в центре, в нашем городе 2 мая.
Now I will show you a short video where you will see what was happening on May 2nd in our city.
Сразу же после 2 мая в Одессе началась борьба за правосудие.
Immediately after the May 2nd, in Odessa, we started a struggle for justice.
В первые же дни на Куликовом поле стали собираться родные, близкие и друзья погибших 2 мая и просто неравнодушные одесситы.
In the subsequent days after the tragic event, the family, friends of the victims, and simply those people of Odessa who were not indifferent, they started gathering on the Kulikova field for commemoration.
Но однако власти поддерживают позицию только одной стороны конфликта.
However, the authorities only support one side of the conflict.
По делу 2 мая были арестованы много людей, но все они были сторонниками антимайдана, то есть, в общем-то, пострадавшей стороны.
In the case of the 2nd May, a lot of people were arrested, but all of them were actually the supporters of the anti-Maidan, the victims.
Никто из тех, кто убивал людей и делал насилие, не был не только осужден, но и даже не находился под следствием.
Not a person from those who carried out murders and the violence not only was arrested, but didn't even get under the investigation.
Все попытки расследования, они тщательно закрываются властями.
All the attempts of investigation are prevented by the authorities.
Тем людям, которые чтут память своих погибших родственников и постоянно на них оказывается давление, на Куликово поле, на эти мирные митинги все время приходят агрессивные радикалы и мешают их наведению.
The people who keep memory of the victims, they are constantly under the pressure because to the commemorations, always the militants come in to intimidate.
Все это время под следствием находились много политических заключенных по этому делу.
All this time, a lot of detainees were kept for the case.
Вот уже почти 2 года тянется процесс, в котором сторонники антимайдана обвиняются в гибели собственных товарищей.
It's been already 2 years since the supporters of the anti-Maidan, the friends and relatives of the victims, are under investigation for the tragic event.
Невозможно коротко описать все выходки и бесчинства бандеровцев.
And it's impossible to describe what these militants do, all their tricks against the.
На матерей в суде, который они приходят, сожгли, вот, например, здесь они сожгли баннер, на котором были детские фотографии погибших.
For example, here at the commemoration, they burned a banner with the pictures of the children
Who died.
who died in the incident.
Значит, в ходе суда, вот так выглядит здание суда, то есть туда приходят радикальные люди и всячески мешают проведению этого судебного разбирательства.
This is a courthouse, and the militants come for hearings and trials in order to distract the hearings, the process.
Вот они здесь, они избивают журналиста, который пришел снимать то, что там происходит.
Here they're beating a journalist who came into a hearing to make a report on that.
Они нападают на матерей, натравливают на них собак, иногда плюют на них, угрожают расправой, обливают водой, устраивают коридор позора для матерей, которые погибших.
They constantly attack the mothers of victims. They breed dogs. They spit on them. They threaten with their revenge.
И при этом всегда присутствует невозмутимая полиция, которая никак не мешает их действиям.
And the police always stands by and does nothing to prevent these actions.
Они являются непосредственно в комнату суда и оказывают давление на судей.
They come in directly into the courtroom and carry out pressure on judges.
Вот это происходит судебное разбирательство, и вы видите сами на этих фотографиях, что происходит.
This is a hearing, and you can see what's happening during the hearing.
Они заставляют судей выносить те решения, которые им нужно.
And they force judges to make decisions which are favorable to them.
Они себя называют патриотами
They call themselves patriots.
и угрожают судьям, что если они не примут нужное решение, то они будут иллюстрированы. Иллюстрация. Do you know?
And they threaten judges that if they do not make the decision that they demand, they will be removed from their position.
Вот так выглядит победа. Они добились.
This is their victory. They got what they wanted.
Многочисленные международные правозащитные организации вначале в целом лояльно относились к украинской власти, но они не могут пройти мимо этих фактов.
Many international human rights organizations that were in general in the beginning loyal to the Ukrainian authorities could not ignore these facts.
Сегодня расследование резонансных событий местными украинскими силами признаны полностью провалившимися всеми международными органами.
Today, the investigation of these resonant events carried out by local Ukrainian forces were recognized as a complete failure by all important international bodies.
Совет Европы, спецдокладчик ООН по вопросам о несудебных казнях, а также помощник генерального секретаря ООН по правам человека сделали вывод об отсутствии прогресса в расследовании и производстве по делам об убийствах, которые случились на Майдане 2 мая 2014 года и 9 мая 2014 года в Мариуполе. Цитата.
The Council of Europe, the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, arbitrary and summary executions, as well as the UN Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, made the conclusion about, and I'm citing, the lack of progress in the investigation and proceedings into the killings that happened in Maidan on May 2nd, 2014 in Odessa and May 9th, 2014 in Mariupol.
В конце апреля этого года в Женеве в рамках сессии ООН по правам человека состоялась конференция с участниками родственников жертв 2 мая.
In the end of April of this year, there was a conference in Geneva within the UN session for the human rights with the relatives, where the relatives of the victims participated.
Заслушав их показания, участники конференции выдвинули идею о необходимости международного расследования одесской трагедии.
After the members of the conference heard the testimonies of the relatives, they put forward the idea of the necessity of an international investigation of the Odessa tragedy.
Потому что существуют на самом деле тысячи видео и миллионы фотографий, которые люди делали на собственные телефоны, и есть много документов, есть все для того, чтобы этими занялись эксперты по-настоящему.
Because we have thousands of videos, millions of pictures that people who are present were taking on their phones. We have documents, we have everything in order for real experts to start an investigation.
И я могу сказать, что это все одесситы, и не только одесситы, а я считаю, что все люди, неравнодушные люди в мире, все, кому дорога справедливость, они все, безусловно, хотели бы расследовать по-настоящему, что произошло, и наказать виновных, и освободить тех, кто невинен.
And I believe all people in Odessa and all people all around the world, those who cherish justice, would like to see a genuine investigation so that the real culprits will be punished and those who are currently under investigation, who are unguilty, will be released.
Светом матерей – это неформальная организация, которая была создана родственниками погибших. Была создана петиция, которую мы просим подписать всех, кто хочет нам помочь.
An informal organization called the Council of Mothers of May 2nd, 2014, which was created by the relatives of the victims, they created a petition that we ask you to sign.
В этой петиции мы просим, ну, собственно, то, о чем я прошу, то, о чем я говорила, мы просим о независимом расследовании настоящими профессиональными экспертами того, что произошло. Вот адрес.
And as I have already said, in this petition, we are asking for an independent investigation by the real experts of what has happened on May 2nd. And we have the website where everyone can go and sign the petition electronically. And I think if we start a list and everyone puts down their email address, we will send around this link so you can sign it, okay?
Спасибо большое. Нам это очень поможет.
Thank you very much, and this will really help us in our effort.
Thank you, Irina and Anna. And just to explain, for those who are watching this on video later, we focused only on Anna, the translator, for security reasons for Irina. Bill, if you could maybe get a list that we can pass around for folks who would like to get this petition sent to them and to sign it online and to spread to others. What's most important of having this report before Greg's report is that you can see the importance of the resistance in East Ukraine, that what faced so many people in West Ukraine, so many people in Odessa and in other regions, of what it means, a fascist control and a destruction, really, of all of what's popularly called civil society, but really the police in the hands of the extreme right-wing and fascist forces, and the way in which they have imposed their domination. It makes really the resistance all the more courageous, and I just to say very much that a salute to Irina and to the Mothers Committee, to all those who are forming a resistance and have the courage to come out and to gather international support to expose this crime to the world. I now want to really turn this over to Greg Butterfield, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. But Greg's report is in two cities that you could genuinely say are liberated areas, but still live every day under the gun, and where there have been enormous clashes, really war, many casualties, and very, very difficult conditions for everyone living there in terms of life, industry, shortages, many other things, which hopefully he can also explain in his talk. But that resistance is an inspiration, I think, for people not only of the Ukraine, but far beyond. So, Greg.
Thank you. First, I also want to say thank you to Irina for coming and for your courage. And it really takes a lot of courage to come and speak out on this issue, coming from a country that's under such terrible siege and coming to the country that's responsible, that's paying the bills for that repression. And speaking to us and helping to educate us and get us involved is so very important. So I want to say thank you from all of us. I also want to acknowledge, because today is a very important day in the struggle against fascism in Ukraine and NATO expansion, and that is today is the first anniversary of the assassination of Alexei Moskovoy, who was the most progressive, sort of revolutionary-leaning anti-fascist militia leader, who founded and led Prizrak, the Ghost Brigade, in Lugansk. And he and 4 of his comrades were killed in an attack on his car 1 year ago today. It was after several earlier assassination attempts. And today, hundreds of people gathered in the city of Alchevsk where a monument was actually erected in his honor that was funded by people from all over the world, that was sculpted and created in Russia and brought and assembled by a team of volunteers from Russia and as well as fighters from the Ghost Brigade. And so we just want to acknowledge this important date and honor the memory of him and his comrades.
Presente.
Presente. He's looked at very much in the region as a figure like Che Guevara or Thomas Sankara, a real, inspirational force that has brought international solidarity, fighters from around the world in the spirit of the international brigades of the Spanish Civil War have come, especially attracted by his example and by the brigade that he set up. And I'll be talking a little bit about that. I was in Donbass, in the Donbass region, Donetsk and Lugansk, for about 2 weeks earlier this month. So much happened and there's so much to talk about that I can't, first of all, I don't want to take away from the focus on Odessa tonight because that's so important. And we'll be having another opportunity probably in June. We'll have another meeting here where I'll go into more depth, and we'll have also a presentation with slides and videos and things. But I just wanted to focus on a couple of things that happened. I was invited to represent the International Action Center at the 4th International Anti-Fascist Conference, which was held this year on May 7th and 8th in the city of Krasnodar in Lugansk. And it drew people from about 30 countries, mostly from Europe, but also from Latin America, from Asia, and from North America. The conference was very interesting, mostly as a place to meet people who were working on this issue and network with people. And it was decided there to establish an international anti-fascist front, because what people from all these countries recognized, not only the danger of what's happening inside Ukraine, but the fact that this is the foremost example of a phenomenon that's spreading throughout Europe and throughout the world at this point, which is a reemergence of this, what they call the brown plague, after the uniforms of the Nazis in World War II, the fascist plague. We see it through some of the activities, some of the forces that are mobilizing around Trump right here in the United States. We see it in U.S. policies, just as they're promoting far-right, ultra-right forces in Ukraine and Eastern Europe to support NATO expansion, they're promoting similar forces from Venezuela and Brazil to Turkey and Syria. This is, capitalism at a dead end, gasping at straws, and they're the gasp that they always go to when they're feeling the most pressure is fascism. And we have to be aware of that. And so there's going to be set up an international anti-fascist front with a special focus on solidarity with Ukraine and the Donbass region, but also a broader perspective of fighting fascism internationally. There were a couple of moments during my visit that really sort of hit me hard in the gut, and I wanted to talk tonight especially about those moments because they really brought home what is going on in Ukraine and what the stakes are and our responsibility here in the United States. The first one was on May 8th when I was part of a small delegation that was invited to visit the base of the Ghost Brigade in the city of Kirovsk in Lugansk. And we actually were driven to the front to to a forward base inhabited by about 15 Prizrak soldiers, many of them internationalist fighters from India, from Belarus, from Italy, from Spain, from Norway and Sweden. Yeah, it was a really great thing to see, but also very difficult conditions that they're living in. Not only because they're like literally within sight of the enemy forward camp across the valley, but because they're living in really difficult conditions, dug into holes in the side of the hill, subject to really severe and rapid changes in weather in that location. While we were there for about an hour, it went from a beautiful sunny day to a thunderstorm to hail, and they said that's pretty common, actually. And so the troops there who are stationed there, they stay on the front for 2 weeks and then rotate out for 4 weeks before they come back. But while I was there, I had the chance to look through the magnified sights of an anti-tank weapon over at the Ukrainian camp across the valley. And what I saw, besides the people and the vehicles moving around over there, were 2 flags, the blue and yellow Ukrainian national flag, and right next to it, the red and black fascist flag, the right sector movement, which is based on the flag of the Nazi collaborator Stefan Bandera. And that was really like, wow, they're like, with the naked eye, you can see their camp. You can't make out any details, but through this magnifier you could. And it really just brought it home in a way where you're like really on the frontier of a potentially very dangerous and bloody situation, and one that people in the region have been living through for the last 2 years. We were told that just a couple of weeks before our visit, the Ukrainian forces had tried to advance and had attacked a bus station nearby. And so now when we were there, we saw the Ghost Brigade forces were digging trenches. And the reason was that the Ukrainian forces are much better equipped. They have much more weaponry and vehicles, which they get either directly or indirectly through the U.S. And so this was the only way to sort of prevent them from trying to make a further incursion, was by digging trenches. And that's really sort of where the war is at right now, between the 2 republics, Donetsk and Lugansk, that declared their independence from Ukraine 2 years ago, right around the same time as the massacre in Odessa. For the last year or so, there's been an alleged ceasefire at the international level, negotiated by Ukraine, France, Germany, and Russia. But in reality, the Ukrainian forces violate the ceasefire all the time, constantly. And although the level of the war is not what it was 2 years ago, when hundreds of people were dying every week, now it's in the ones, the tens, sometimes dozens of people being killed or wounded every week on the front line. And those who are forced, who are still living there, are largely those who are the most vulnerable: seniors, single parents with children, and others who just don't have the resources and don't have anywhere to go. So it's so important and so urgent that these really dedicated fighters who came in as volunteers and now are part of the process of forming a people's army in Lugansk and Donetsk are staying, at the front line and undergoing these difficult conditions to protect the population there. The second moment that really struck me came a day later on May 9th, which is Victory Day, celebrated throughout the former Soviet republics as the day when the Red Army entered Berlin and defeated Nazi Germany in 1945. And on that day, I was in the capital of Lugansk. A few of us were invited to march alongside the Lugansk Communist Party delegation in the parade, and it was an incredible experience coming out of the Communist Party office in the center of the city early in the morning and seeing tens of thousands of people streaming down the main street of the city that just a couple of years ago had been largely depopulated because it had been under attack, under bombing attack, and under threat of invasion. And I've been to a lot of big demonstrations over the years in Washington and here in New York and other places, but never felt the same level of unity and solidarity and determination from people, from senior veterans down to children, that I felt in the crowd there. It was, most people were carrying signs with portraits of their relatives who had fought and died in the Great Patriotic War, World War II, as they call it in the Soviet Union. And it wasn't just about that historic shared tragedy that cost 27 million Soviet lives, and saw Lugansk and Donetsk and many other areas in the western part of what was then the Soviet Union under Nazi occupation for years. It was the fact that just 2 years before, the Nazis had been at the gates of the city again. When we were driving to Lugansk the night before, we stopped about 2 kilometers outside the city limits. There's a tank, a destroyed tank, that's set up as a memorial by the side of the road. And in the spring of 2014, 4 anti-Maidan, anti-fascist fighters had stayed with that tank outside the city and volunteered their lives basically to fend off the advancing Ukrainian forces so that the resistance inside the city could prepare, to defend the city. And they were killed. They were burned alive inside the tank. And now it's on the side of the road, sort of as a memorial, and heaped with flowers, candy, ribbons. And while we were there, we stopped by the side of the road for maybe 10 minutes to take pictures. And while we were there, at least half a dozen cars stopped, local people coming out, families coming out of their cars with flowers and things to lay on this tank in thanks and memorial for those who had sacrificed themselves. And while I was on the march, I was with one of the comrades from the Lugansk communists, and he was marching carrying his 2-year-old daughter, and it really, for me as a parent, was a sort of a punch in the gut to realize that this child was just an infant at that time, when there was literally fighting on the outskirts of the city. People were being torn apart by bombs in the center of the city. And so this was not just a historical commemoration, but a real living march against fascism in the heart of this city that is living that struggle every day. Today, and every day. So here, what I hear from folks there, and from our representatives of the anti-fascist struggle in other countries as well, is that the most important thing we can do is try to break down the information blockade in the United States, especially. In Europe, there's actually been some breakthroughs, like the Paul Moreira film, which we saw a clip of, about the Odessa massacre, and I would urge people to seek that out if you haven't seen it. You can search for it online and find the English subtitled version. It's about an hour long, and it's really well worth seeing. In Europe, there's some room for debate. Here in the United States, the struggle there has been silenced to such a degree that most people aren't even aware that there is a war, that the U.S. is involved in it up to its eyeballs, and that there's that there's even another side. If it's mentioned at all, we're told that, the former Eastern Ukraine is under Russian occupation, under a terrorist regime, basically. And that's completely the opposite of what I saw in Donetsk and Lugansk. What I saw was people doing their best to survive under very difficult conditions, where, for example, in Donetsk city, the capital of Donetsk, the front line is literally on the southwestern border of the city. It's not even out in the countryside there. It's you can drive 10 minutes out of the center of the city, and you're in the midst of bombed out houses. And you can hear mortar fire and gunshots in the distance. And actually, the week that I was in Donetsk was very quiet. It was the first week of May. It's a big holiday week. And Orthodox Easter fell at that time, and so there was basically a informal ceasefire going on. But just in the past week, the attacks from the Ukrainian side have escalated again, and many deaths and more destruction of homes and vehicles right around the city. What I asked people what they felt the status of the war was. And everyone I spoke to, from journalists to folks in the militia to taxi drivers and parents, all agreed that the war is not over, it's not going away. And the reason is that the United States doesn't want it to go away. The U.S. is continuing to prop up the regime in Ukraine, which has been bankrupted many times over in the last couple of years, but continues to receive funding from the IMF, from the U.S. and the EU to pay its debts to the IMF, continues to get military aid, both overt and covert, from the Western powers. And that, everybody sort of understands there that the real goal is not to take back, not just to take back the Donbass region, but the goal is to bring NATO and U.S. forces to the border of Russia and extend this process of regime change that they've been perfecting in Ukraine to Russia, and that because of this, they're caught in a very difficult position. Russia cannot abandon Donbass because they know that they would be next. The U.S. refuses to stand down because they have very long-standing plans to, through NATO expansion, through wars in the Middle East and so on, to bring about regime change in Russia and break it up into digestible parts, to loot it of its resources. And so everyone agreed that for us in the United States, we need to inform, first of all, the activists here, the activist community that is unfortunately largely unaware or unwilling to take up this issue. And then through them to reach out to larger portions of the population to explain the war danger that exists, that it's not going away, that people are suffering and dying, and that it has an impact on our movements here in the United States as well. Because the U.S. drive for war, whether it's against the Donbass republics in Russia, or whether it's in Syria or Venezuela and Brazil and elsewhere in the world, is going to impact every struggle here for justice, from Black Lives Matter to the Fight for 15 to the immigrant rights struggle and our efforts to be in solidarity with refugees. It means cutbacks. It means more repression at home. It means the danger of young people who are caught up in the military through the economic draft, or perhaps in the future through a direct draft, being sent to fight and die in other parts of the world, when we should be fighting for justice here at home. And so I think what I'd like to say is that it's there's only one acceptable solution, only one resolution that's possible, and we have an important part to play in it, and that is to support the efforts of the popular movements in Donbass and Ukraine to overturn the neoliberal Nazi oligarch regime in Kyiv, in Ukraine, which, is repressed right now, as Irina described so well in the case of Odessa. But as things worsen there, the fight back will grow. And the resistance that continues on a daily basis in Donetsk and Lugansk. At the same time that we support them, the best thing that we can do is fight against U.S. intervention and NATO expansion and the growth of the Pentagon here at home. Put pressure on Washington and Wall Street to force them to stop or limit their intervention in support of the Ukrainian regime, make it an ungovernable situation for them at home through our struggle, which will help to lift the boot heel of the fascists and the imperialists off of the backs of the people in Odessa and throughout Ukraine. So, on behalf of everyone who gathered at that conference, the children that I met in Lugansk and Donetsk, the elders living in basements near the front line, and all the working people in Donbass who are doing their part, I just want to say they're waiting for us. And they're waiting for us to bring this struggle to the Black Lives Matter movement, to the workers' struggles, to the immigrant rights struggles, to link it up with all of the anti-war struggles that we're involved in. And I believe that in the coming months and years, that is exactly what we're going to do.
Okay, we're going to really throw the floor open for comments, for questions. At the end, I'll ask speakers to come up and address this. This is really meant both to be an information exchange. It can also be a brainstorming exchange as to how to widen a struggle against NATO. I think the one thing that strikes me most about having the two reports side by side is you can see how stark the choices are, how sharp the struggle is, how truly difficult the struggle is. So let me just take a minute and ask folks to, raise your hand. We'll do a stack. Take a few people and a few questions. Okay, right here, and then we'll take here.
Where can you find that movie about this massacre?
If you give me your email, I send you the link.
Because you should put in Eurovision protest. It's almost 500,000 protests.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, and let them see that that's new.
Let's be in contact.
Okay, right here.
Well, two things. First is I understand there was a vote in Holland recently which was directed against the Ukraine regime entry into the European Union in some way, which I think is a positive development. The other is more of a observation that I've had over the last several years, even before the Maidan took place. And I actually myself was engaged in a number of projects and so forth. And there was a very large polemical, ideological force of pro-fascist Ukrainians who are trying to change the history of the Soviet era, who have been threatening even toward me as an editor in some cases. And this goes back, to 2007, 08, 9, and 10. And I don't want to name the names of these people, but it's in Canada and the United States. I understand there's a effort to build a memorial to the victims of communism, which is completely another example of the revision, the kind of history that is being put forward in Canada, in Ottawa, in a place where a judicial building should be. That was just an observation. These are various observations. The first was a point, and perhaps the speaker or speakers can talk to the question of the Dutch vote.
Okay. All right, so and as I said, we'll have some answers and some responses, but why don't we just continue on this line? So
yeah, this is just information. People may have seen this. I think it's disappeared on the internet. It is a picture of John McCain standing on the street with fascists in the Ukraine and a poster this big of Stefan Bandera. I think we should get that picture around if we can find it again.
I've seen that picture.
Really, it's amazing. And it was close to the time when the uprising occurred. Just amazing, disgusting.
you can find it on our website.
Oh yeah, you've got it already.
Yeah,
Okay.
There's a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Did you have another point on that? Or?
No, that's all.
Okay. All right, so Tony, and then, as I said, maybe we'll go back around, okay?
So, Greg, what you said about, how can we best get the blockage of the information out? Is that best by, I know you put a lot of stuff on Facebook, and is that sharing that information more and more and getting people to do that? That's one way. The other thing I want to say is that the People's Power Assembly, which meets here every Wednesday night, it's an organization that primarily does work on fighting racist police terror in the U.S. And is part of the Black Lives Matter movement. But recently, we had a tremendous educational on Nakba right before the Nakba demonstration, and many of the new young people to the struggle really liked that, and we raised having an educational once a month on an international struggle. So we did raise the Ukraine, and we would like Anna and Greg to come and do that educational soon on Wednesday night.
That's great.
Back around, yeah.
I've got a two-part question. My understanding is there were more than 1 million people that went east over the Russian border, to include people that were being drafted who didn't want to be. And so there's a substantive group over there. And so I would like to know what's the probability of those people coming back and joining with the people in the East Ukraine for some action? And second, what is the attitude in general of the population from the East Ukraine all the way to Odessa in forming, another country separate and apart from these people in the Northwest to seek their own objectives?
Conrad?
Hi everybody, my name is Shahid Conrad and I'm a Secretary General of Pakistan USA Freedom Forum. First of all, I want to say thank you, the brave voice, give us some real thing, and I hope you can show your face very soon. You don't need to hide your face, telling the truth. And thank you for your translation, Anna. And she always standing against the occupation. Greg, we owe you thanks as activists in New York, in the United States. You gave us the information. Thank you very much. IAC, I hope that all activists try to understand these forces who want to who can brutally kill other people thousands of miles away, spend money like they damn care about the system in this country for education, for health. They choose to create a problem. Just in Second World War, Winston Churchill chose Germany or communism. They choose communism. They become a friend of communism. And you see that how the big part Russian army played to win the Second World War. So they always, and then they give the easy hand to Russia. Control how long you're gonna area you can control. So it's a start of, same way that English left Kashmir problem, Palestinian problem. So they left the problem. So what's the point is this? That let's talk to the people. Let me not be fooled by these superpowers. They love to create problem because that's the way they rule on us. So at this moment, we have to stand against aggression. Any stand against aggression, that's our goal. And let's support everything which we can, and especially in this country, United States. We are not aware of what's happening in Eastern Europe, what happened in Yugoslavia, power, game of power, and what's happening in Ukraine now. It's very sad that in this country, in election year, we're not talking about what we're doing outside. They put us in trouble of the race question. This might be a game of the Western to keep in this country race problem, not to talk about the human problem. So that's my activist. I'm asking you, be aware and support it to the people of Ukraine, Palestinian, Kashmirian, and never hide your opinion. We're not going to change the world, we have seen. But tell the truth, that's the only thing. And I want to say thank you every activist who came down over here and who done a great job for the honor of humanity. Thank you.
Sort of going around, anyone else on this side? Okay.
He kind of asked my question already, I think.
Okay, so you're passing, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Bill?
I was wondering to what extent you could comment on the political and especially economic organization taking place in Donetsk and the Donbass today. To what extent the factories and mines, are they running under what management? And also, I believe you went to Chisinau, where I had pleasure visiting Soviet times, but I was wondering if you would say something about the situation there. I think nothing more illustrates the obsolescence of the capitalist system, world capitalist system, is that Russia surrendered. They overthrew the Soviet power. They had Yeltsin. He gave them the keys to the store. And they still didn't have room for it. They still wanted to destroy it. The resistance that the current Russian government is giving is not a matter of choice. It's a necessity imposed on them by the economic needs of imperialism.
Okay. Thank you, Irina. My name is Miloš. I'm from Belgrade, Serbia, Yugoslavia. And I was glad to hear about the international brigades, so I would like to hear a little bit more about that. I heard that also there were some volunteers from Serbia coming to help you there, but also that there were some volunteers from Croatia on the other side, with the snipers and all of that. So I'm just curious about the whole scene, about who is coming from where and on which side. And the second question is maybe unlikely question, but I'm still curious. I know that in Ukraine there is at least 2 different churches, Orthodox churches, right? At least 2, maybe 3, I don't know. So what is the position of the Ukrainian Orthodox churches now in this conflict?
Я не могу вам сказать, что я очень компетентна в этом вопросе.
А потом отвечать будем.
А?
Потом ответим.
Потом.
Потом.
Да.
Okay, move in. Anna,
Yeah,
you have...
Bill actually asked my questions. As I understand, the oligarchs are in support of the Kiev regime, right? And then what's happening with the ownership of lands and whatever within the republics? And also another question, also economic. Are there any economic ties between the 2 republics? And is there any economic relation at all with the Ukrainian government itself?
Heavy, big questions. We'll have to continue it halfway into the night, but any other questions coming up here? Yeah?
Yeah, I have a question more or less taking off on what the question about the industries. I have 2 questions, 2.5 questions. One is, what are the workers? There are an enormous number of workers in the mines and factories of the East. And of course in the Western Ukraine, there are huge production plants, and there were. And we haven't heard anything much from the workers organizing. I know that fascism is aimed at crushing all working class organizations. So are workers being intimidated into organizing, or how have they responded to help the families of the people murdered in Odessa, and also and the wars, and also the appointment of people like Saakashvili to the head of Odessa province, and then Gaidar, Russian Gaidar, horrible Gaidar's daughter, is now in the central government. How are Ukrainians responding to this takeover of their government by foreigners? And the other thing I wanted to ask is, those fascists, all the time when you see them, they have masks on. And does anybody ever know who the hell these people really are? Does anybody ever say, oh, I know that guy, he's from something? Or are these all mercenaries from somewhere?
All right, other comments or questions? If not, I think we're going to ask our speakers to come up to the front and take on, and some of the questions are kind of combined, but they're both distinct to the situation in Odessa, and others to economic, political organization in the East. Big questions.
Okay, I'll start. I'm less well informed than Greg, that's why I'll start and I'll answer whatever I can. Regarding the sentiment in other parts of Ukraine, I'm from Lugansk region originally, and my mom still lives there, but she lives outside, an hour outside of the liberated area of Lugansk. And fortunately, there are no military activities in her little village. However, the next village where my aunt with her children lives, there was a lot of destruction and a lot of what's going on. And the sentiment is they're so scared they just don't want war. Really, my mom doesn't care who will be in the government. She just does not want the war to come into her area. But on the other hand, she feels very threatened by the new government and its militant supporters. For entire year, we talk on the phone, but she wouldn't tell me what she has experienced, even though the village, there were no military actions in the village, but the anarchy that was released with this coup, the anarchy, the people realized that they can get away with things that are illegal and immoral. So she was just receiving threats, and she was afraid to speak up against the government. She's still afraid to discuss with me political issues on the phone. And she knew people who were physically attacked, who were kidnapped by these bandits. And it's pretty intimidating environment there. I'm not sure about the sentiment in the West. However, as we have seen at the Maidan, it looks like people are deceived by the propaganda. And in fact, I myself, before I started exploring the issue on my own through alternative media, I believed that European Union represents a better future. And this is just propaganda media, and in Ukraine it's working very well. Okay, and I believe I'll ask Irina about Saakashvili. Какая была реакция на Саакашвили и на других американцев, которые были приведены в парламент? Ну, Саакашвили знаем, главное. Там еще есть американская гражданка, она министр финансов. Вот какая в общем у населения, какая реакция? Они это обсуждают, они негативно?
Во-первых, это разные случаи. Это гражданка и Саакашвили, это разные...
Ну, расскажи про Саакашвили.
Про Саакашвили очень легко рассказать. Вначале он был очень... Точно так же, как и Майдан. Саакашвили сначала очень хорошо, сильно поддержали со стороны. Сейчас даже представители Майдана уже разочаровались в нем, потому что все, что он делает, это только пиар. Он что-то делает для того, чтобы получить... Потому что он получает зарплату, хорошую зарплату в Америке. За то, что он там делает, он всего лишь на свой пиар, и просто пытается раскачать ситуацию. И пытается, как мне кажется, метить президента и дальше еще. В Одессе его вообще уже никто не воспринимает, кроме кучки идиотов.
So surprisingly, Saakashvili was in the beginning pretty well supported. However, as the time went on, even the supporters of the Maidan, of the Kiev government, became disappointed in him and realized that all he does is PR, the propaganda that just supports the American and Kiev interests. And also he's just for his personal interest, financial interest to receive his paycheck, which is pretty big over there. And perhaps...
Он не скрывает, что он получает в Соединенных Штатах. Он декларацию показал, что он получает деньги здесь, 100 тысяч, по-моему, в год или что-то.
Yeah, and he does not hide that he is getting paid from the United States, and he actually has declared how much money he has received. And then most probably he's just aiming at some higher position. So just very, very small amount of people who are just so confused supporting him right now. Oh, I just remembered. You had a question about the draftees who crossed the border to Russia, right? My cousin, he's from the eastern part, not from the western part, but he fled the draft. He is living in St. Petersburg now, and no, he's not considering going back. I thought that they are more or less supported in Russia, but after I talked to him, he's saying that it's pretty difficult through bureaucracy to get the aid, and he's just struggling to find work, to get his papers, and I would think that the very little percentage of people who are willing to go back and do something. But I will, Greg perhaps will tell more about that.
Okay, I'll try to address that and some of the other points that were raised. As Sarah said, it's a lot. So, yeah, in terms of those who fled, especially refugees who went to Russia, a lot of folks are encountering the same kind of situation as Anna's cousin, and you know, frankly, it seems like the Russian government at this point wants to encourage people who fled to go back, and people are going back. Even when I was in Donetsk, some of the journalists I met with commented that just in the recent months the traffic has gotten so much heavier in the city because there's a lot of people coming back. Same thing in Lugansk. And you know, part of it is sort of the economic pressure of being a refugee, but also it's, you know, people are coming around to the fact that they want to actually return and try to reestablish their lives and their family ties and reclaim their homes, and they see that the Ukrainian regime is not going to overrun the republics anytime soon. They see that the people who have stayed are able to defend themselves, and so they're more willing to go back. The problem is that the republics are under a very tight economic blockade from Ukraine and the West. The economy basically was blown apart after the coup and when the war started. Production has resumed in some of the factories, especially in Donetsk. They have actually, according to the head of the Donetsk International News Agency, who I toured some of the war-ravaged areas with, he said that they've actually become self-sufficient in ammunition in the past year by reorganizing some of the metallurgy plants, and it's helped with their defense efforts, as well as putting people back to work. But in the city, it's you know, there's a lot of unemployment and underemployment. In Donetsk, in the capital city, what we saw, you know, what's popping up is a lot of like little coffee shops, cell phone shops, things like that are easy for people to sort of set up and don't cost a lot to set up, and they can get what they need fairly easily imported from Russia. But the prices are high because everything has to be imported, and it's, you know, a drop in the bucket in terms of what's needed in terms of employment. Donetsk has made some advances in terms of nationalizing some factories and strategic areas of the economy. There's a lot of pushback from Russia on that because they have a lot of ties to the local oligarchs in that part of the country who want to hold on to their property that they got ill-gotten gains from the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so there's tension there. The republics are still very much dependent, especially for food aid from Russia, especially in the rural areas where along the front line where it's not possible to grow food, or it's not safe, where there's landmines everywhere and it's not possible to actually go far outside of your home. And so there's a tension there that has yet to be resolved, and the leftists who I met with and spoke to are, everyone's very much aware of the contradictions and the tensions going on there in this anti-fascist struggle, but at the same time it's, property relations have remained on a capitalist basis by and large, although the sentiment of the people for renationalization, for full employment and so on is pushing in one direction, while the pressure from the oligarchs is pushing in the other direction. So it's a struggle that will have to be resolved in the future. Lugansk, unfortunately, has made a lot less progress economically than Donetsk has. It seems like the oligarchs covertly still control the economy pretty strongly. There's a lot more unemployment. There's a lot less. It's funny because there's a lot more sort of pro-socialist symbolism that's used in Lugansk. Red stars everywhere and stuff. But economically, they haven't done anywhere near as much as Donetsk has done to sort of try to turn the situation around and create more of a people-centered economy. So people there are really struggling and reliant on aid from Russia. In terms of the attitude of the population in the rest of Ukraine, just to follow up on what Anna said, in cities like Odessa and Kharkov, where there is a strong, strong sentiments towards independence or towards unity with the Donbass regions against Western Ukraine. The movement has been so repressed that it's really hard to do any kind of above ground organizing. And in the West, in the western part of Ukraine, in the recent months, they finally were able to outlaw the Communist Party of Ukraine. People still, it's incredible, people still come out, like on Victory Day, in different cities and villages, but it's under a constant threat, and often there are provocations, there are attacks by the fascist gangs, just like in Odessa. The police, do everything they can to divert them, it's for workers' organizations, for unions, it's very similar. Some of the so-called independent unions supported Maidan, supported the overthrow of the old government, but now that when they try to go out on strike or they have a dispute, they find themselves infiltrated by these gangs. They find themselves under scrutiny by the security forces, and basically they have to back down because it's one of the tactics that the government has used also against student organizations has been to target students or workers in particular areas with being drafted into the military if they act up. So that's a very something that hangs over everyone's head in the western part of the country. In terms of the international brigades in the east and the mercenaries in the west, right now I should say that a lot of the volunteers, especially in Donetsk and Lugansk, have been demobilized
temporarily at least. A lot of those who came from Russia have gone home. Many of those who came from other countries have stuck around, in part because they're in danger of being arrested if they go home. That's, for example, there's someone who worked with the International Action Center here in New York, Zach Novak, who was at many of our early demonstrations after the coup in Ukraine. He's been over there for the last year and a half, working in the media, doing English translation and basically being a anti-imperialist American voice in Donetsk. And he can't come home because he would be arrested and indicted for terrorism. Similar things have faced other international volunteers who came from Spain and Italy and Greece. In Spain, they finally dropped the indictment, but it discouraged a lot of people from going back. And so those who are there now, and those who are going sort of understand that if they go, they may be there for a while. And so people are a lot of people are demobilized, but they're they say they're ready to go back at a moment's notice if the war resumes at full scale. And they say they can have, in Donetsk, they can have about 50,000 additional troops, volunteers and local troops back under arms within 48 to 72 hours if necessary. And that's part of their preparedness for the resumption of the war that they see as inevitable. When I was at the Ghost Brigade camp in Lugansk, they explained about their experience with foreign mercenaries on the Ukrainian side. They said that there were 3 camps around Kirovsk on the Ukrainian side. One was the regular Ukrainian army, which they put like a small battalion of right sector troops into that to police the draftees who make up the majority of the Ukrainian forces there, to keep them from basically deserting. Then there's Idar Battalion has a camp, which is one of the fascist volunteer battalions. And then there's a battalion of Polish mercenaries. And they know this because they hear them on the radio speaking in Polish, and they don't speak Ukrainian or Russian or any of the other languages common to the area. And they have a Polish national flag flying at their camp, and uniforms that are not used in the country, and so on. There's been a lot of reports all throughout the last couple of years of foreign mercenaries fighting on the Ukrainian side. Blackwater has been alleged to be involved, probably at the level of giving mostly of security for high-level officials in Ukraine. But there have been, paraphernalia and of U.S. mercenaries, for example, found in the wreckage of the Donetsk airport when it was liberated last year. Things like that. So, the U.S. is involved. You can be sure there's all kinds of vile forces crawling around in there.
So in Mariupol, they had this famous guy with a Jersey accent said, "Get out of my face." So is there a lot of those people there?
My guess is yes. It hasn't been, it's hard to give specific numbers on something like that. But Mariupol is a hotbed. For those who don't know, Mariupol is part of the Donetsk region, but it's been under the control of some of the worst fascist forces and for the last couple of years, and it's considered a hotbed of where the U.S. Does its training and arming of these forces. So if it's anywhere, that's probably where you would find folks like that, yeah. And I wanted to just address what Tony said earlier about sharing information and what we can all do. I think that we can and we should continue to do as much as we can in alternative media, on social media, about getting this information out, especially to people who we know are looking for alternatives to the mainstream media. But we need to expand into the kind of things like Tony was suggesting of bringing this issue to organizations we work with that fight around domestic issues, around the Black Lives Matter struggle and workers' struggles and so on. To try to start making those links and showing how these struggles are connected, and it's one fight against capitalism, imperialism, and fascism. And also, seeking out more opportunities, as we've been doing with the event at the Left Forum this weekend, having international guests like Irina come and speak, do speaking tours in different cities, and trying to think outside the box a little bit, outside of our small circles of people who think about these issues from an anti-imperialist perspective, as important as that is, and really reaching out to young people and other sectors who are struggling under this system, who are trying to find alternatives and allies, and show how we can strengthen both struggles at home and abroad by working together and learning from each other.
How accurate is the soccer in terms of reporting?
Go ahead.
What was your question?
Soccer, S-A-K-E-R. How accurate is their reporting of the action on the ground?
I think, they basically get their information from the militias, from the People's Army reports, and so I would say it's pretty accurate. I think their analysis tends to be, from my point of view, a little more conservative in terms of the Russian establishment perspective, but in terms of their military analysis, I think, it's information that any way that it gets out and informs people about what's actually happening on the ground is really helpful.
Про церковь. Я не считаю себя большим экспертом, но у нас ситуация с церковью точно такая же, как и во всем обществе. То есть здесь, у нас есть украинская православная и российский патриархат, да? И они в точности ориентируя своих прихожан, тоже разделяют на два лагеря фактически. Но тем не менее, я хотела сказать, что в то же время, когда случилась ситуация, когда после собрания на Куликовом поле, когда оттуда вышли наши активисты, когда они шли мимо церкви, их начали избивать радикалы. И в это время даже украинская церковь, она ударила колокола, собирая таким образом внимание привлекает к этой идее, привлекая народ. Ну вот это, в общем-то,
Last answer regarding the church. So yes, there are two churches, Ukrainian Orthodox and Russian Orthodox, and they sort of orient their adherents respectively in two camps. However, she gives an example when the activists who demand justice for victims of May 2nd were passing by in a march, passing by the Ukrainian church, and they were attacked by right-wingers. The Ukrainian church started beating the bells in order to bring attention so that people would come and help them. Okay.
Well, I think we should all, first of all, thank Irina and wish her safe return, and also send her an assurance that we have her back and we will do everything we can to continue the solidarity under the very difficult conditions of the resistance, and particularly Odessa, very courageous. And to thank Anna for not only for the translation, but for the organization of this meeting, the organization of the forum, Left Forum, the emails, the leaflets, really so much work.
Thank you for coming, otherwise it would be a failure. That would be on me.
And to thank Greg, who really for the last couple of years nonstop in the translation, the presentation, the preparation of material. This is an unfinished project. This was like a raw report back where we're not here with a proposal, but we do have to think on this as to what can be done both to tie these struggles together. I thought that was an important suggestion from Tony on at the People's Power giving a report. We should just take note of the Freddie Gray ruling in Baltimore today, just to know that police murders right here are completely unpunished, it's like a carte blanche, and draw those links, make those comparisons. I think we need to revive some of the work that was done immediately after the coup, where we reached out to many organizations who had embraced and applauded and thought Maidan was a very exciting upheaval, you remember, and just to turn around that mood and expose it for the fascist coup it was. That was an uphill political struggle. So we should think how we can take next steps, and at the same time know that it takes preparation, takes thought, presentation, but that's very much ahead of us. To make an invitation for everyone who's here tonight, also, we were asked by Brazilian activists who are part of a committee against a coup, a Committee for Democracy and Against a Coup in Brazil. There'll be a planning discussion meeting here tomorrow night. A number of Latin American activists are coming, particularly Brazilian activists are coming to plan a demonstration in the coming days on the unfolding coup that is taking place, a coup supposedly on a parliamentary and legal basis. Doesn't change what is being planned in terms of the overturn of a popular, progressive elected government, and the U.S. role, which everywhere is to destroy, destabilize, inject enormous destruction for the gains that people's movements and progressive governments have made. And so we always want to make that focus on the role of U.S. imperialism as it is today here, talking about NATO, and tomorrow where we're talking about the struggle in Brazil. So stay tuned, and we'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Another announcement. Yes, Vijay.
So we are concluding a tour of the Lumad peoples. They are the indigenous peoples of southern Philippines.
Right.
They're here in New York closing out their national tour, and we're concluding with an action called U.S. Out of the Philippines, Rally for Food, Land, and Justice in Mindanao. Tomorrow, assembling at 5:30. The program will start at 6 p.m. at the Times Square Armed Forces Recruiting Station, 200 West 43rd Street on 43rd Street and 7th Avenue. So we're concluding a national tour with the indigenous people of Mindanao and southern Philippines.
So that's important. Everyone get that? At the Times Square Recruiting Station, that's the 43rd Street. Times Square is so big,
6
unless you
p.m.
know the exact place to gather, you'll miss it. 43rd at 6 p.m. and 43rd Broadway. Tomorrow.
5:30.
5:30 you said, or 6?
5:30. Yeah, we're
5:30.
Yes.
Okay.
Again at 6.
Program at 6.
Okay, great. See you all there.